On the 18th of November, 1965, at 14:20 Indochina time, Sergeant James "Red" Malloy crouches in elephant grass, 800 meters west of landing zone X-ray, in the Drang Valley, Pleiku Province, and slaps his 5th magazine into his M16. He has 2 magazines left in his bandolier. The firefight has lasted 11 minutes. Alpha Company, 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry, still calls for ammunition resupply, but the Hueys cannot land. Malloy counts 7 men in his squad still firing. He knows the sound every rifleman dreads, the metallic click of a bolt locking back on an empty magazine. The story Americans tell about fire superiority in Vietnam is simple. United States forces carried more ammunition, fired faster, and overwhelmed communist troops with sheer volume. Military Assistance Command, Vietnam Doctrine in 1965, emphasizes automatic fire and aggressive maneuver. The M16 rifle holds 20 rounds and cycles at 700 rounds per minute. The M60 machine gun feeds 100-round belts and delivers sustained fire. On paper, 9 Americans with 140 rounds each plus 1 machine gunner with 800 rounds should dominate any squad-sized engagement. The myth says firepower wins firefights. The reality of ammunition discipline in jungle combat operates on 3 interlocking constraints. First, resupply windows collapse in heavy contact. Helicopter landing zones in the central highlands and coastal lowlands require clearing, marking, and security. A typical rifle company in 1967 carries 2 basic loads per man. 5 to 7 magazines for riflemen, 400 to 800 rounds for machine gunners. That load supports 10 to 15 minutes of sustained combat at careless rates of fire. After that, men wait for helicopters that may not arrive. Second, vegetation and terrain invert the firepower advantage. Dense jungle in Quang Ngai and Thua Thien Province limits effective engagement ranges to 15 to 50 meters. Soldiers cannot see targets clearly, so they fire at sound and movement. Full automatic bursts waste rounds into tree trunks and leaves. Third, communist tactics deliberately trigger ammunition panic. People's Army of Vietnam and Viet Cong units probe, withdraw, probe again, forcing defenders to burn magazines without decisive contact. A squad leader faces the same calculation in every engagement: suppress the enemy enough to maneuver, but conserve enough ammunition to survive until extraction. The moment someone yells, "Check your ammo," the mathematics of survival replace the doctrine of fire superiority. Not firepower, but fire discipline decides who walks to the landing zone. On the 27th of January, 1966, at 09:35 Indochina time, Lance Corporal Mike Herrera feeds his 3rd belt into the M60 machine gun on Hill 258, 6 kilometers northeast of Bong Son, Binh Dinh Province. Echo Company, 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines has been in contact for 19 minutes. Herrera has 2 belts remaining, 200 rounds. His assistant gunner already died carrying the ammunition. The company commander radios for fire discipline, but Herrera's squad leader keeps screaming for suppression. Herrera watches tracer rounds arc into the tree line and disappear. He does not know if he hits anyone. The M60 manual recommends 3 to 5 round bursts for accuracy and barrel life. Herrera has been firing 8 to 12 round bursts because targets vanish in the vegetation. At that rate, 200 rounds lasts 4 minutes. The nearest helicopter resupply sits 18 minutes away at Bong Son airfield. Herrera makes a choice that appears in no field manual. He stops firing. I let them think the gun was down. Told the lieutenant we had a jam. Sat there for 6-7 minutes while they kept yelling for me to get it up. I had maybe 150 rounds left and no idea when we'd get more. You run dry, everyone dies. Herrera's silence creates a gap in the company's fire plan. 2 rifle squads shift positions to compensate, exposing themselves to enfilade fire. 3 Marines take wounds during the movement. The company executive officer later writes in his after-action report that ammunition shortfalls forced tactical compromises throughout the engagement. Herrera never reports his decision. When the resupply helicopter finally lands at 10:08 Indochina time, he loads 4 fresh belts and resumes firing. His squad leader tells him he did good work keeping the gun running. Herrera does not correct him. The lie protects Herrera from a court-martial, but it also reveals the unwritten code of ammunition management. Squad leaders and gunners negotiate invisible agreements about when to fire and when to hold. These negotiations happen through gesture, silence, and selective deafness. The official record shows continuous suppressive fire. The actual audio, if anyone recorded it, would reveal long gaps punctuated by short, controlled bursts. Not continuous fire superiority, but rationed bursts and calculated silence kept Echo Company alive until the helicopters arrived. The mathematics of ammunition management create cascading failures across entire operations. When one squad conserves, adjacent units absorb increased pressure. When one platoon runs low, company commanders shift fire support away from planned objectives. When one battalion exhausts basic loads, division logistics scramble to redirect helicopter assets from other missions. The system works until too many units hit critical thresholds simultaneously. Operation Masha White Wing in Binjin Province during early 1966 demonstrates this cascade. 1st Cavalry Division companies operating in the Kim Sun Valley report ammunition shortfalls across multiple battalions by the 3rd day of sustained contact. Helicopter pilots fly double and triple sorties, but the tonnage requirements exceed available lift capacity. Rifle companies begin rationing ammunition on the 29th of January. Squad leaders impose 5-round limits per engagement. Platoon leaders deny permission to return fire unless targets present clear silhouettes. Company commanders request extraction for units that fall below 30% of basic load, but battalion headquarters denies most requests. The division keeps units in contact despite critical ammunition levels, because breaking contact concedes terrain to communist forces. This operational pressure transforms individual ammunition decisions into collective survival calculations. A rifleman who burns through magazines early forces his squad mates to compensate. A squad that exhausts ammunition forces the platoon to redistribute from reserve. A platoon that runs dry forces the company to pull personnel from other missions to conduct emergency resupply. The burden flows upward until it reaches commanders who must choose between maintaining tactical pressure and preserving unit effectiveness. The choice should be obvious, but doctrine and career incentives push commanders toward aggression even when logistics cannot support it. The communist side faces identical mathematics with different constraints. People's Army and Viet Cong units in 1966 operate with no expectation of aerial resupply. Their logistics depend on porters, bicycles, and concealed caches. A main force battalion moving south along the Ho Chi Minh Trail in Quang Tri Province carries approximately 40,000 rounds of rifle and machine gun ammunition. That load supports 1 major engagement or 3 minor contacts before the unit must withdraw to resupply points. People's Army commanders plan operations around these limitations from the beginning. They select engagement locations near cache sites. They establish withdrawal routes that pass through resupply nodes. They define success not by terrain held, but by casualties inflicted relative to ammunition expended. A rifle company that kills 15 Americans while firing 800 rounds achieves a favorable exchange rate. The same company that kills 5 Americans while firing 800 rounds has wasted resources. This calculation creates different tactical behaviors. People's Army platoons in the Asau Valley during 1968 ambush American patrols at ranges of 20 to 40 meters, fire concentrated volleys for 30 to 60 seconds, then withdraw before American units can establish fire superiority. The tactic maximizes damage per round expended and minimizes the risk of encirclement that would force defenders to burn through remaining ammunition. American units call this tactic shoot and scoot and consider it evidence of communist unwillingness to stand and fight. The interpretation misses the point. Communist forces withdraw not from fear, but from logistics. They preserve ammunition for the next ambush, the next engagement, the next operation. American forces often pursue until they exhaust their own ammunition, then call for extraction. The communist unit returns to the same area 2 days later with replenished loads. The American unit rotates to a different sector. Over time, this pattern grants communist forces persistent presence despite inferior firepower. On the 12th of May, 1967, at 1645 Indochina time, Captain Ian McKenzie crouches beside a regional force platoon 3 kilometers south of Guk Pho, Quang Ngai Province. McKenzie serves with the Australian Army Training Team Vietnam as an advisor to South Vietnamese irregular forces. The platoon has 22 men, each carrying 4 to 6 magazines for their M1 carbines and M16 rifles. They have been in contact with a Viet Cong company for 38 minutes. McKenzie estimates they have fired 400 to 500 rounds already. No resupply exists for regional forces this far from the district compound. The ammunition they carry is the ammunition they have. McKenzie watches a regional force squad leader walk down the line, physically touching each rifleman's magazine pouches. The squad leader does not ask how many magazines remain. He feels the pouches and makes notes on a scrap of paper. Then he redistributes. Men with 3 magazines give one to men with 1 magazine. The result is rough parity. Everyone ends up with 2 magazines, roughly 40 rounds. They didn't talk about it. The bloke just moved down the line, patted each man's webbing, and sorted it. No drama, no argument. I asked the platoon sergeant later why they didn't just call for resupply. He laughed. Said the district chief would send a truck in 3 days if we were lucky. So they plan for what they've got, not what they wish they had. McKenzie's observation exposes a divide between American and Vietnamese ammunition doctrine. United States units in 1967 expect aerial resupply within 30 to 60 minutes during major operations. Regional and popular forces in remote areas expect nothing. This scarcity forces regional force and popular force units to develop disciplines that American squads often ignore. They fire single shots at identified targets, not bursts at suspected positions. They hold fire until ranges close to 30 meters or less. They end engagements quickly, break contact, and preserve ammunition for the next fight. The Guk Pho platoon survives the 12th of May engagement and walks back to the compound with 6 rounds per man. No American unit would accept that margin. McKenzie writes in his monthly report that Vietnamese irregular forces demonstrate superior fire discipline under resource constraints. His report circulates through Military Assistance Command advisory channels, but generates no doctrinal changes. The American approach remains centered on firepower abundance, not firepower rationing. The assumption persists. Helicopters will always arrive, ammunition will always flow, and running dry is an anomaly rather than a constant risk. Not American firepower, but Vietnamese scarcity discipline kept that regional force platoon effective. The contrast between American and South Vietnamese ammunition management reveals institutional assumptions about logistics. The United States military, in 1967, operates on the premise that industrial capacity can solve tactical problems. Factories produce millions of rounds per month. Ships transport thousands of tons across the Pacific. Depots distribute ammunition to forward bases throughout South Vietnam. Helicopters deliver loads directly to units in contact. The system works when demand remains predictable and enemy forces cooperate by fighting in locations accessible to American logistics. The system fails when demand spikes unexpectedly, when weather grounds helicopters, when enemy forces fight in terrain that prevents aerial resupply, or when too many units need ammunition simultaneously. American commanders struggle to accept these failures because they contradict institutional identity. The United States military defines itself by logistical dominance. Admitting that logistics cannot always deliver undermines the fundamental premise of American firepower doctrine. South Vietnamese forces operate without these illusions. Regional force platoons in Quang Nguoi province know the district chief cannot deliver ammunition on demand. Popular force squads in Binh Dinh province know the province chief allocates ammunition based on political considerations, not tactical need. Army of the Republic of Vietnam battalions in Thu Thien province know their supply requests compete with more than 40 other battalions in Uk Corps. Scarcity teaches these units to hoard, ration, and redistribute. It also teaches them to avoid contact when ammunition runs low, even if that means conceding terrain to communist forces. American advisors interpret this caution as cowardice or incompetence. They miss the underlying calculation. A unit that runs dry dies or surrenders. A unit that preserves ammunition survives to fight again. South Vietnamese forces prioritize survival over tactical aggression because they understand their logistics cannot support American-style operations. On the 3rd of February, 1968, at 11:20 Indochina time, Private First Class Nguyễn Văn Lực lies in rubble 200 meters south of the citadel wall in Hue, Thu Thien Province. Luke serves with the 4th Battalion, 324th Bravo Division, People's Army of Vietnam. He carries an AK-47 rifle with 4 magazines, 120 rounds. His battalion entered Hue on the 31st of January with full combat loads. 2 days of urban fighting have consumed most of that ammunition. Luke has not received resupply since crossing the Perfume River. He watches United States Marines from 1st Battalion, 5th Marines advance down Tran Hung Jiao Street, firing M16s on full automatic. Luke estimates they fire 10 rounds for every 1 round he fires. His squad leader orders selective fire, shoot only at targets within 25 meters, and only when certain of a hit. Luke aims at a Marine crossing an alley intersection 18 meters away. He fires 2 rounds. The Marine falls. Luke has 88 rounds remaining. We knew the Americans had unlimited ammunition. We did not. Every bullet had to count. I watched Marines fire entire magazines at walls and windows. We could not afford that. Our commanders told us, 1 target, 1 or 2 shots, then move. If you miss, you do not fire again. You wait for a better target. Luke's battalion holds sectors of southern Hue for 23 days. They do so with dwindling ammunition and no functioning resupply line after the first week. People's Army of Vietnam After Action documents from the Hue Fighting Report that rifle companies averaged 15 to 30 rounds per man by mid-February. Some squads shared magazines, rotating weapons among men who still had ammunition. Others fought with AK-47s in one hand and captured M16s in the other, using American ammunition scavenged from dead Marines. The battle for Hue ends on the 24th of February, when People's Army forces withdraw across the Perfume River. Luke walks out with 11 rounds in his last magazine. He never fires them. Communist ammunition discipline in Hue inverts the American understanding of fire superiority. People's Army units accept casualty rates that American commanders would consider catastrophic, but they never accept running out of ammunition before disengagement. They plan retrograde routes, cache supplies along withdrawal corridors, and end fights before magazines run empty. American units often fight until extraction, trusting helicopters to arrive before ammunition exhausts. That trust fails more often than official reports admit. Not superior firepower, but acceptance of retreat when ammunition runs low kept People's Army infantry effective. The pattern repeats across every terrain and year. Ia Drang, Bong Son, Juk Pho, Hue. The names change, but the calculus does not. Fire superiority depends on rounds remaining, not rounds available, and every soldier learns the same sound, the click of a bolt on an empty chamber. On the 11th of May, 1969 at 07:15 Indochina time, First Lieutenant Robert Hayes leads 2nd Platoon, Bravo Company, 3rd Battalion, 187th Infantry, up the eastern slope of Hill 937 in the Asao Valley, Thua Thien Province. The hill will later be called Hamburger Hill. Hayes's platoon has 28 men. Each rifleman started the assault with 7 magazines, 140 rounds. They have been fighting for 4 days. Resupply helicopters have landed twice, but they could not carry enough ammunition for the entire battalion. Hayes estimates his men average 3 magazines each, 60 rounds. The North Vietnamese bunker line sits 40 meters upslope. Hayes orders his squad leaders to check ammunition counts before the next bound. The results terrify him. 11 men have 2 magazines or fewer. 4 men have 1 magazine. 1 rifleman has 9 rounds in a partial magazine and nothing else. Hayes radios the company commander and requests permission to halt the assault until resupply arrives. The company commander denies the request. The battalion commander has ordered all units to maintain pressure. I told my guys to make it count. No rock and roll, no spray and pray. Aimed shots only. We moved in bounds. 1 fire team shoots, 1 moves, and you do not waste rounds on suppression you can't see working. I watched kids with 1 magazine left trying to decide whether to shoot now or save it for when they really needed it. How the hell do you make that call? Hayes's platoon advances 15 meters in 35 minutes. They expend an average of 18 rounds per man during that movement. 2 soldiers run completely dry and have to borrow magazines from wounded men being evacuated. The North Vietnamese recognize the slowing rate of American fire and counterattack at 08:05 Indochina time. Hayes's platoon stops the counterattack, but only because neighboring units still have ammunition to provide flanking fire. At 08:40 Indochina time, a Chinook helicopter drops ammunition nets 70 meters below the platoon's position. Hayes sends 6 men down the slope to retrieve the nets while the rest of the platoon holds. Those 6 men carry 420 pounds of ammunition uphill under sporadic fire. By the time they return, 3 more riflemen have run dry. The battle for Hill 937 lasts 10 days and consumes an estimated 1 million rounds of small arms ammunition. That number appears in official histories as evidence of American fire superiority. It does not capture the moments when individual squads went silent, waiting for resupply while North Vietnamese troops maneuvered closer. It does not count the time squad leaders lied about ammunition status to keep their positions in the assault order. It does not record the weight of a last magazine in a man's hand, or the metal slap of seating it into the rifle, or the quiet calculation of whether to fire now or hold for 10 more seconds. Hayes walks off Hill 937 on the 20th of May with his entire platoon. He carries 2 magazines. He never fires the second one. Not because the fighting stopped, but because he refuses to reach the bottom of that last magazine again. The lessons from Hill 937 spread through informal channels rather than official doctrine. Platoon leaders returning from the Asao Valley brief their replacements on ammunition discipline. Squad leaders write letters to friends in other units describing techniques for managing fire rates. Company commanders adjust standard operating procedures without waiting for division guidance. These adaptations occur unit by unit, each learning independently through experience. The 101st Airborne Division issues no formal directive on ammunition management after Hamburger Hill. Neither does 3rd Marine Amphibious Force after comparable experiences in Quang Tri Province. The institutional military remains committed to fire superiority doctrine. Individual units adopt conservation practices despite doctrine, not because of it. The United States military learns fire discipline slowly, inconsistently, and at the squad level, rather than through doctrine. By 1970, rifle companies in the 25th Infantry Division and 101st Airborne Division begin issuing written guidance on ammunition management during extended patrols. Squad leaders receive explicit authority to enforce ceasefires and redistribute magazines. Some units adopt the regional force practice. Check ammunition before contact, redistribute before movement, and plan extraction based on remaining rounds rather than tactical objectives. On the 21st of March, 1970, a rifle platoon from Alpha Company, 2nd Battalion, 27th Infantry, operates along the Thai-Ninh-Cambodian border. The platoon encounters a People's Army squad 800 meters inside Cambodia. The firefight lasts 7 minutes. The platoon leader orders a ceasefire after expending 40% of basic load. He calls for extraction instead of pursuit. The after-action report justifies the decision with a single line. Ammunition discipline preserved combat effectiveness for subsequent operations. That line represents a doctrinal shift that official histories rarely document. Fire superiority, as understood in 1965, meant overwhelming the enemy with volume. Fire superiority, as practiced by 1970, meant preserving enough ammunition to control the next fight and the fight after that. The shift did not come from military assistance command directives or training bulletins. It came from squad leaders who watched men run dry, from machine gunners who lied about jams, from platoon leaders who learned to count magazines instead of trusting doctrine. It came from the sound every soldier learned to dread, the click of a bolt locking back, the slap of a last magazine seating home, the silence when the belt ran out. Fire superiority ends when the last magazine runs dry.